For months ago in Auckland, ALEX EALA had a match point. She was serving at 5-3 in the second set against Wang Xinyu, one game away from a WTA final, and she chose to go for it, a forehand driven deep into the deuce corner. It sailed long by a few inches. Wang exhaled. EALA never recovered the momentum. 3 sets later, she was the one applauding Wang at the net, and something about the way she held herself walking off that court told you she knew exactly what had slipped away. Now, 4 months and an entire career's worth of growth later, she gets the same opponent in the second round of the Italian Open. Same player, different EALA. At least, that is the question this match will answer. Let me take you through why this is not just a rematch, but a referendum on how far EALA has actually come in 2026, and where the cracks in Wang's game might finally be wide enough to exploit. To understand what EALA is walking into, you have to understand the season she has had. The 2025 version of ALEX EALA was a player the tennis world was starting to notice. She finished that year ranked 50th, the first Filipina ever to crack the WTA top 50, and she did it largely on the back of one volcanic run at the Miami Open where she beat Elena Ostapenko, Madison Keys, and then Iga Swiatek, a 5-time major champion 6-2, 7-5 in the quarterfinals. That Miami run was not a fluke, but it was fueled almost entirely by adrenaline and the kind of reckless confidence that comes when you have nothing to lose. EALA entered that tournament on a wild card. She left it as a semi-finalist, having beaten 3 players who had a combined 16 years of tour experience on her. The 2026 version has been a different project. This EALA has had to learn how to win when people expect her to win. She reached the 4th round at Indian Wells, where Coco Gauff retired against her while trailing 6-2, 0-2, a match in which EALA was not simply benefiting from Gauff's misfortune, but actively dismantling her from the opening game. She made the 4th round at Miami again. She climbed to a career-high ranking of 29th in March. And then the clay season arrived, and the growth narrative got complicated. Here is where I need to be honest with you, because if you are a Filipino fan watching this, you deserve honesty rather than hype. EALA's clay record entering Rome stood at 2-3 for the season. She won her opener at the Linz Open, beating Julia Grabher in straights, then lost in the next round. She lost to Leylah Fernandez 6-1, 6-4 in Stuttgart, a match where she never found her timing. And in Madrid, she beat Anastasia Pavlyuchenkova comfortably, but then ran into Elise Mertens and was taken apart 6-2, 6-1. That Madrid loss was not competitive. It was the kind of defeat where the scoreline tells you exactly what happened. EALA was dictated to from the first point and never found a way to impose herself. So when EALA walked onto the Terra Batu at the Foro Italico for her first round match against Magdalena Frech, there was a real question about whether this clay swing was going to remain a grind or whether something had shifted during the week she spent back at the Rafa Nadal Academy in Mallorca. Toni Nadal, yes, that Nadal, was watching from the sideline during her practice sessions, and EALA herself said something that caught my attention. She said, "We worked a lot on feeling the ball, moving well. I feel like I'm moving better than I did last year." That is not a generic training camp soundbite. A left-hander talking about movement and ball feel on clay is a player who has been told, probably by Toni himself, that her weapons do not change on this surface, but her preparation time does. Against Frech, we saw both versions of this clay court EALA in a single match. The first set was a demolition. 6-0, EALA was hitting her lefty forehand with vicious angles cross-court, pulling Frech wide and then redirecting through the open court. The patterns were crisp. The footwork was early. It looked like a player who had internalized something new. Then the second set happened, and that newer version flickered. Frech adjusted, started taking time away by standing further inside the baseline, and EALA could not find a counter. She lost 3-6, and suddenly the old questions were back. But here is the part that mattered most, the third set. Down a break at 1-3, she fought back. Won 4 of the next 5 games. Closed out 6-4. That is not the same player who folded against Mertens in Madrid 3 weeks ago. Something has hardened. Now, about Wang Xinyu. Let me paint you a picture of the physical challenge EALA is facing. Wang stands 6 feet tall and weighs 165 pounds. She hits the ball with a flat, penetrating trajectory and averages nearly 158 kilometers per hour on her first serve. She is 24 years old, right-handed, and she describes her own game with one word: aggressive. When she is on, she is one of the most difficult ball strikers in the draw to contain because her height gives her leverage on the serve and her ground strokes arrive at a pace that does not let you set up comfortably. But the Wang who enters this match is carrying her own baggage. Her 2026 season has been a story of promising starts that dissolve under pressure. In Auckland, she made the final, beating ALEX along the way, but lost to Svitolina in straights. Since then, her results have been uneven. She won her first 3 matches of the hard-court season, including wins over Angelina Kalinina, Ostapenko, and Linda Noskova in Auckland, but has not replicated that form consistently. On clay specifically, the numbers paint a revealing picture. In Rouen last month, she was forced to retire in the second round against Sorana Cîrstea with a thigh injury, trailing 3-5 in the second set. And in Madrid, she won her first match against Chloe Paquette in 3 sets, then was upset by Laura Sampson. Ranked well below her 2-6, 6-3, 6-0. That final scoreline is jarring. Winning the first set 6-2, and then losing the next 2 3-6 and 0-6 suggests a player whose competitive engine can stall dramatically when things go sideways. This is the opening ALEX needs to understand, and I suspect her team already does. The Auckland semi-final, when you go back and study the sequence of events, reveals something specific about how Wang handles adversity. She went up 4-0 in the first set. ALEX clawed back and took it 7-5 after Wang double-faulted on set point. In the second set, Wang broke early again, ALEX recovered again, and at 5-3, serving for the match, ALEX pushed Wang to the brink. Wang herself said afterward, when she hit that forehand, "I was just like, okay, if it goes in, I can just clap." That is an honest admission from a player who, at the highest pressure moment, was waiting for her opponent to miss rather than constructing a point to win. Now translate that dynamic to clay. On hard courts in Auckland, Wang's flat ball striking was rewarded because the surface kept the ball low and fast. Points were shorter. She could impose her power before ALEX had time to find rhythm. On clay in Rome, the physics change. The ball sits up. It slows down through the surface. ALEX, who moves exceptionally well for her height 5'9" with that left-hander's natural reach advantage on the forehand side, will have more time to track down Wang's power shots. And here is the tactical crux: ALEX's left-handed forehand cross-court goes to Wang's backhand. On a hard court, that exchange is roughly neutral because Wang can flatten her two-handed backhand and redirect. On clay, where the ball arrives with more spin and kicks higher off the surface, that exchange tilts toward ALEX. Wang is 6 feet tall, which is an advantage on serve, but can become a liability in the movement department when she has to bend low repeatedly on a slow surface to handle heavy topspin driven to her backhand hip. The coaching box will matter in this match. ALEX's connection to the Rafa Nadal Academy gives her access to a clay court philosophy that has been refined over 2 decades. Tony Nadal's presence in her development, even in a consultative role rather than a day-to-day coaching one, introduces a strategic vocabulary that is specifically designed for these conditions. The idea of working the forehand cross-court to establish dominance, then flipping to the down-the-line redirect when the opponent leans too heavily into the diagonal, that is textbook Nadal tennis. ALEX does not play like Rafa, and nobody expects her to, but the decision-making architecture, the understanding of when to extend a rally and when to change direction, is something that can be taught. And it is exactly what ALEX's game has been missing on clay this season. Against Freck, there were flashes of it. Against Wang, she will need more than flashes. From Wang's perspective, the game plan is straightforward: serve big, stay aggressive early in rallies, and avoid getting dragged into extended exchanges where ALEX's court coverage turns rallies into attrition. Wang's serve is her biggest weapon, and on clay it will kick and slide in ways that can trouble a left-hander if the placement is sharp to the body or wide to the ad court. If Wang can get a high percentage of first serves in, she averaged about 65% on first serve points won this season. She can keep the points short and negate the surface advantage ALEA would have in longer rallies. But here is what I keep coming back to. In Auckland, with a thigh that was healthy and conditions that suited her game perfectly, Wang needed a saved match point to beat ALEA. She won that match 5-7, 7-5, 6-4, and even in the third set, after ALEA took a medical timeout trailing 0-3, the Filipino fought back to 4-5 before Wang held on. That is not a player who dominated her opponent. That is a player who survived a fight against a competitor she could not put away. For months of development separate that match from this one. ALEA has played 16 more matches since Auckland. She has beaten a top 4 player at Indian Wells. She has navigated the kind of pressure-packed moments, saving break points at 1-3 in the third set against Freck yesterday, that build competitive scar tissue. Wang, meanwhile, has a retirement in Rouen and a collapse in Madrid on her recent clay court resume. But I am not going to sit here and tell you ALEA will win. That would be dishonest, and it would also miss the point. Wang Xinyu is ranked 33rd in the world for a reason. She hits the ball harder than ALEA, she serves bigger than ALEA, and she has the kind of raw power that can end points on any surface regardless of how well her opponent moves. If Wang serves at her ceiling and keeps rallies under 6 shots, she can win this match in straights. That is a real possibility, and anyone who dismisses it is not watching the same sport I am. What ALEA has going for her is something harder to quantify, but impossible to ignore if you have been tracking her trajectory. It is the rate of learning. From wildcard in Miami 2025 to a career-high ranking of 29 in March 2026, ALEA has compressed roughly 3 years of normal development into 12 months. She is not the same player who lost that Auckland semifinal. The question is whether she is different enough, specifically on clay, to handle a power hitter who has the physical tools to dominate rallies if given the opportunity. Watch the first 4 games. ALEA's movement in the opening exchanges will tell you everything. If she is getting to Wang's flat ground strokes early and redirecting cross-court with depth, this becomes a long match, and long matches on clay are where ALEA's fitness and competitive stubbornness give her an edge. If Wang's serves are landing deep and ALEA is returning from 2 steps behind the baseline, the power differential takes over and the match gets away from her quickly. There is another dimension to this that does not show up in any stat sheet. ALEA left Auckland knowing she had a match point and did not convert it. She left that court knowing she had been the better player for stretches of the match and still lost. That kind of knowledge can go 2 ways. It can become a source of doubt, the nagging fear that you will reach the big moment and flinch again. Or it can become fuel, the crystallized understanding that you belong at that level and that the margins are small enough to close. Everything I have seen from ALEA since Auckland suggests it has become fuel. The way she fought back against Freck in the third set yesterday was not the tennis of a player carrying doubt. It was the tennis of a player who has been in the fire before and understands what it costs to stay there. For Filipino fans watching this, and I know there will be a lot of you, because the energy around ALEA has been building all season, understand what you are witnessing. You are watching a 20-year-old, left-handed, trained at the Rafa Nadal Academy, who has already beaten Swiatek and competed with the best players in the world, walking into a match that 4 months ago would have felt like an uphill battle and now feels like an even contest. That is not hype. That is measurable progress reflected in rankings, results, and the specific way she carries herself on a tennis court. Wang Xinyu is a dangerous opponent. She is physically imposing, she hits with authority, and she has already demonstrated once this year that she can outlast ALEA in a 3-set war. But that was January. This is May. The clay is slow, the angles are different, and ALEA has spent the past week working with people who know more about winning on this surface than almost anyone in the history of the sport. If ALEA brings the version of herself that demolished Freck in the first set yesterday and combines it with the version that clawed back from 1-3 in the third, this match is hers to take. If Wang's serve is firing and her ground strokes are landing inside the lines, it might not matter. That is what makes this compelling. Not the rivalry, not the rematch narrative, But the simple fact that both of these players are at a point in their careers where a match like this, in the second round of a WTA 1000, with a potential third-round meeting against Elena Rybakina lurking, can change the direction of an entire season. The ball goes up tomorrow. And somewhere in that first service motion, in the split second between toss and contact, we will begin to learn which version of ALEX EALA showed up in Rome.